The 70s Grindhouse circuit was a lawless frontier where filmmakers pushed every boundary until the courts fought back. These weren't just controversial movies. They were criminally prosecuted, banned across continents, and dragged through obscenity trials that made headlines. Judges called them threats to civilization. Distributors went to prison. Yet these films became underground legends, screened in locked theaters where only the brave dared enter. What made them so dangerous that governments worldwide wanted them erased from existence? The Sinful Dwarf, 1973. This Danish nightmare didn't just disturb audiences, it got its distributors arrested in multiple countries for moral corruption. The plot follows a malicious dwarf who keeps women captive in his mother's boarding house, forcing them into degradation while she profits from their misery. Director Vidal Raski created something so relentlessly bleak that even hardened Grindhouse patrons walked out. The film's tiny villain, played by Torben Bille, became an icon of transgressive cinema, wielding a cane and cackling through scenes designed purely to provoke disgust. British authorities seized Prince immediately, classifying it alongside the most extreme obscenity cases of the decade. The Sinful Dwarf wasn't trying to be art or entertainment. It existed solely to test how far exploitation could go before society struck back. Denmark's own censors, notoriously liberal, condemned it. American drive-ins that dared screen it faced local obscenity charges, with prosecutors arguing it had zero redeeming value. Critics didn't review it, they reported it to authorities. The film vanished from legitimate distribution for decades, surviving only through bootleg VHS tapes traded in underground collector circles. Its reputation grew precisely because it was forbidden, becoming the holy grail for those seeking cinema's absolute bottom. Today it's studied as an example of exploitation's darkest impulses, a film that crossed every line just to prove lines existed. Number 11, Forced Entry, 1973. Director Jim Sotos crafted something genuinely dangerous with this pseudo-documentary about a Vietnam veteran turned predator stalking Los Angeles. What got prosecutors involved wasn't just the brutal content, but the clinical, detached way Sotos filmed it, making viewers complicit in the violence. The protagonist, played by an uncredited actor to avoid career destruction, commits escalating crimes while the camera observes without judgment or morality. This absence of condemnation is what authorities found most obscene. The film refused to punish its villain or provide moral clarity. Grindhouse theaters in New York faced immediate legal challenges, with city officials threatening to revoke licenses if they continued screenings. The court cases centered on whether artistic intent existed or if this was purely exploitation designed to profit from depravity. Schoolgirls in Chains, 1973. Don Jones directed this uncomfortable exploration of captivity and family dysfunction that immediately attracted obscenity charges across the American South. Two brothers kidnap young women and imprison them in their isolated farmhouse while their bedridden mother orchestrates the madness from upstairs. What separated this from typical exploitation was Jones's insistence on psychological torture over physical spectacle, creating sustained discomfort that authorities found more obscene than graphic violence. The film's distribution sparked trials in Georgia and Alabama, where prosecutors argued it existed solely to corrupt public morals. Defense teams struggled to articulate any redeeming social value in a story this relentlessly unpleasant. The courtroom became theater itself, with prosecutors screening disturbing scenes for juries who visibly recoiled. Several theaters pulled it voluntarily, rather than face community backlash and potential legal fees. Jones claimed he was examining the psychology of captors and victims, exploring Stockholm Syndrome before the term became widely known. Critics dismissed this defense as intellectual cover for exploitation. The film's low budget actually enhanced its documentary feel, making everything seem more plausible and therefore more threatening to social order. Cinematographer James E. McLarty shot it like a newsreel from hell, refusing glamour or stylization. Schoolgirls in Chains became a case study in obscenity law, with legal scholars debating where exploitation ended and criminal incitement began. It disappeared from distribution for years, remembered mainly through court transcripts and moral panic newspaper coverage that ironically preserved its infamy. Thriller, A Cruel Picture, 1973. Swedish director Bo Arne Vibenius created an international incident with this revenge saga about a mute woman forced into multiple forms of degradation who eventually seeks violent retribution. What triggered worldwide obscenity prosecutions wasn't the revenge violence, but the explicit unsimulated scenes Vibenius inserted, claiming they were essential to understanding the protagonist's suffering. Courts in Norway, Finland, and West Germany disagreed violently, banning it immediately and charging distributors with trafficking obscene materials. The film's star, Christina Lindberg, became simultaneously an exploitation icon and a symbol of cinema's exploitation of women, her haunting eye patch face appearing on bootleg posters worldwide. Vibenius defended his choices as brutal honesty, refusing to prettify or glamorize his subjects' torment. This argument failed spectacularly in court, where judges saw only commercial exploitation disguised as social commentary. American grindhouses received heavily edited versions that still triggered obscenity charges in conservative jurisdictions. The film's reputation grew precisely because it was forbidden, with collectors paying exorbitant prices for uncensored Scandinavian prints. Quentin Tarantino later cited it as direct inspiration for Kill Bill, sanitizing and legitimizing elements that had once been criminally prosecuted. Critics remain divided on whether Vibenius made an honest film about victimization or simply victimized his audience. The explicit scenes remain indefensible to many scholars, regardless of surrounding context. Thriller. A Cruel Picture exists in cinema history as both cautionary tale and testament to how far exploitation filmmakers pushed before courts pushed back harder. The Witch Who Came from the Sea, 1976. Director Matt Cimber crafted something psychologically disturbing that transcended typical grindhouse fare, which somehow made authorities even more determined to prosecute it. Millie Perkins delivers a devastating performance as a deeply damaged woman whose childhood trauma manifests in increasingly violent fantasies and actions. Britain's Director of Public Prosecutions included it on the notorious video nasties list, despite it being more psychological character study than exploitation spectacle. The film's effectiveness at depicting mental disintegration is precisely what made it legally dangerous. This wasn't cheap thrills, but genuine disturbance. Prosecutors argued it glorified violence against men, particularly a castration sequence that became centerpiece of multiple obscenity trials. Cimber insisted he was exploring generational trauma and the lasting damage of childhood violation, themes that courts found irrelevant to obscenity standards. The film's dreamlike cinematography by Dean Cundey, who later shot Jurassic Park, created hallucinatory sequences where reality and delusion merged. This artistic ambition didn't protect it from seizure and prosecution. Video retailers in the UK faced criminal charges for stocking it during the video nasties moral panic. The film disappeared from legitimate distribution entirely, becoming available only through underground trading networks. Modern critics have reappraised it as a serious examination of trauma, but for years it existed only as a forbidden object, known mainly through reputation and legal infamy. The witch of the title is mental illness itself, haunting the protagonist in ways that disturbed audiences more than supernatural horror ever could. Fight for Your Life, 1977. Robert A. Endelson directed this racially charged home invasion nightmare that immediately faced obscenity and hate speech prosecutions across multiple countries. 3 escaped convicts, led by a virulently bigoted criminal played by William Sanderson, terrorize an African-American family in their rural home. The film's relentless verbal abuse, featuring language so extreme that even grindhouse standards couldn't accommodate it, triggered legal actions arguing it incited racial violence. Britain banned it completely, with authorities claiming it had no artistic merit and existed solely to spread hatred. American prosecutors in several states pursued obscenity charges, focusing on the combination of violence and racial degradation. Endelson defended the film as commentary on racism's ugliness, arguing that depicting hatred honestly was necessary to condemn it. Courts remained unpersuaded, noting the film's exploitation. Marketing contradicted claims of social purpose. The promotional materials emphasized violence and degradation without mentioning any anti-racist message. William Sanderson, who later found mainstream success on Newhart, rarely discussed his role in this film, which remained a career embarrassment. The film's climactic revenge, where victims turned the tables violently, was intended as catharsis, but courts saw only more prosecutable content. Fight for Your Life became nearly impossible to see legally for decades, surviving through bootlegs that enhanced its forbidden reputation. Modern viewers debate whether it's genuinely anti-racist or simply racist exploitation with a thin redemptive veneer. The film remains deeply uncomfortable and controversial, a relic of Grindhouse cinema's willingness to weaponize social tension for profit and provocation. I Spit on Your Grave, 1978. Mir Zarchi's revenge epic became the most prosecuted film of the Grindhouse era, facing obscenity charges in virtually every country where it appeared. The story of a writer who suffers brutal assault and methodically destroys her attackers played in grindhouses for years, despite constant legal challenges. Roger Ebert called it the worst film ever made, dedicating unusual energy to condemning it as vile and contemptible. Gene Siskel joined the moral crusade, publishing the names and addresses of theater owners screening it, encouraging readers to protest. These attacks only enhanced its underground popularity, turning it into a cultural battleground about violence, vengeance, and representation. Britain's Director of Public Prosecutions targeted it aggressively during the Video Nasties campaign, with police raiding video stores and arresting proprietors. The film's defenders argued it was a female empowerment narrative showing consequences for male violence, a reading prosecutors found absurd. Courts focused on the extended assault sequences, ruling they existed for prurient interest, regardless of surrounding context. Camille Keaton's committed performance as the avenging victim became iconic in exploitation circles and later feminist film theory. The film spawned decades of debate about whether revenge narratives empower or simply exploit. Zarchi maintained he created an honest film about justice when legal systems fail, but authorities saw only obscenity. Multiple countries banned it entirely, while others allowed only severely edited versions that destroyed narrative coherence. The film has been remade, analyzed academically, and continually reassessed, but its original Grindhouse version remains legally problematic in several jurisdictions today. Last House on Dead End Street, 1977. Roger Watkins created something genuinely transgressive under the pseudonym Victor Janos, a film so disturbing that prosecutors struggled to categorize it legally. The plot follows a recently released criminal who begins producing extreme underground films, with the movie itself becoming the snuff film it depicts. This meta-commentary on exploitation made authorities particularly nervous. The film seemed to be exactly what it criticized, collapsing any distance between art and obscenity. Shot on a minimal budget with non-professional actors, it achieved documentary realism that made every scene feel dangerously authentic. Prosecutors in several states pursued obscenity charges, arguing the film existed solely to depict degradation without purpose. The courtroom screenings themselves became events, with juries exposed to content designed to provoke maximum discomfort. Watkins later expressed regret about the film's extremity, admitting he was in a dark psychological place during production. This confession did nothing to restore the film's reputation or legal standing. Britain banned it as a video nasty without hesitation, and it remained effectively unavailable for decades. The film's grimy aesthetic, shot on grainy film stock with available light, created an atmosphere of genuine menace that polished productions couldn't match. Horror aficionados who finally saw it through bootlegs reported being genuinely disturbed, not entertained. Last House. On Dead End Street pushed beyond exploitation into something approaching cinematic assault, testing whether audiences could distinguish performance from reality. Its obscurity for years was partly legal suppression and partly distributors' reluctance to handle something this reputationally toxic. Watkins died in 2007, never escaping the shadow of this film that defined and destroyed his cinematic legacy. The Beast in Heat, 1977. Italian director Luigi Bezzella created this notorious Nazi-exploitation entry that combined historical atrocity with exploitation so extreme that prosecutors worldwide pursued it aggressively. Set in a concentration camp where a sadistic female doctor conducts experiments involving a savage man-beast, the film combined every exploitable element imaginable. What made it legally prosecutable wasn't just content, but the historical context, with prosecutors arguing it trivialized genocide for commercial gain. Multiple European countries banned it immediately, with West Germany pursuing particularly aggressive legal action against distributors. The film's cheap production values and bizarre monster suit couldn't disguise or excuse its offensive premise. Batzella claimed artistic freedom and historical commentary, arguments that failed spectacularly when courts examined the actual content. Britain's video nasties list featured it prominently, with authorities using it as an example of exploitation's absolute nadir. American grindhouses rarely touched it due to potential legal liability and community outrage. The few that did faced immediate protests, and often withdrew it to avoid criminal charges. The Beast in Heat became shorthand for exploitation cinema's worst impulses, a film with zero defenders and universal condemnation. Even exploitation fans often drew the line here, finding the combination of historical horror and monster exploitation indefensible. The film essentially vanished from distribution, surviving only through collectors who treated it as forbidden artifact rather than entertainment. Modern availability through specialty labels sparked renewed controversy, with commentators questioning whether some films should remain suppressed. Batzella made numerous exploitation films, but this remains his most infamous, a career-defining disaster that overshadowed everything else. Faces of Death, 1978. John Allen Schwartz created a phenomenon and legal nightmare with this pseudo-documentary, claiming to show real human death captured on camera. While much of it was staged, the film's presentation as authentic footage triggered obscenity prosecutions worldwide, based on claims it profited from human suffering. The film mixed genuine autopsy footage with elaborately faked scenes, creating confusion about what was real and making legal categorization difficult. Britain banned it immediately, with authorities arguing that even faked death presented as real violated obscenity standards. American prosecutors and conservative jurisdictions pursued criminal charges against video retailers, focusing on community standards arguments. The film became an underground phenomenon precisely because it was forbidden, with teenagers seeking it out as an ultimate taboo experience. Schwartz later admitted most scenes were fabricated, but this confession came after years of legal battles and moral panic. The film's clinical narration, delivered by actor Michael Carr posing as expert Dr. Francis B. Gross, added pseudoscientific credibility that made everything more disturbing. Critics condemned it as morally bankrupt exploitation, profiting from morbid curiosity without educational value. The success spawned numerous sequels and imitators, each facing similar legal challenges. Faces of Death entered popular culture as a rite of passage, the forbidden film that separated the brave from the squeamish. Legal scholars debated whether depicting death, real or staged, constituted obscenity or simply bad taste. The film remained banned or restricted in dozens of countries for decades, available only through underground trading. Cannibal Holocaust, 1980. Ruggero Deodato created the ultimate prosecuted Grindhouse film, one that resulted in the director's arrest on suspicion of creating an actual murder film. This Italian jungle nightmare about a documentary crew's final footage faced obscenity charges in dozens of countries and remains banned in several today. The film's commitment to realism was so successful that Italian authorities believed they were investigating genuine murders, not special effects. Deodato had to produce the actors in court to prove they were alive, a surreal legal spectacle unprecedented in cinema history. Even after murder charges were dropped, obscenity prosecutions continued worldwide based on the film's genuine animal violence and extreme simulated content. The film's structure, presenting found footage from the doomed expedition, created uncomfortable questions about documentary ethics and viewer complicity. Critics were divided between those who saw serious commentary on exploitation and those who saw only exploitation itself. The animal scenes, undeniably real, remain indefensible to most modern viewers and were the focus of many successful prosecutions. These 12 films didn't just push boundaries, they exploded them so violently that governments fought back with criminal prosecutions. They represent an era when cinema was genuinely dangerous, when screening a film could mean arrest and possession could mean prosecution. But here's the uncomfortable question. Were authorities right to suppress them? Or does even the most extreme expression deserve protection? Should some films remain forbidden? Or does banning them only increase their power? Drop your most controversial take in the comments. Which of these deserve prosecution and which deserve protection? And most importantly, does watching forbidden cinema make you a film scholar or part of the problem these prosecutors feared?